$50 million. That is exactly how much money Jim Parsons walked away from. It was a Tuesday. The script was ready. The contract was on the table. Everyone thought season 13 was a sure thing. The network was prepared to make history, and the cast was set to become the highest-paid ensemble on television. The executives stared, paralyzed, watching their billion-dollar empire evaporate because the one man they couldn't replace refused to play along. They didn't see the summer of hell that had led to this moment. They didn't know about the broken foot, the tragic death of his dog, or the exhaustion that had hollowed him out. They saw a star walking away from a fortune. He saw a man saving his own life. He had been quietly breaking down for months, but what he saw in the mirror that morning changed everything. Before we start, don't forget to press that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's begin. To the global audience, the cast of The Big Bang Theory wasn't just a group of actors. They were a dynasty. On screen, they were best friends, an inseparable tribe of geniuses and neighbors who had captured the hearts of millions. Off-screen, the narrative was even more intoxicating. They were the highest-paid actors in television history, a unified front that had locked arms during negotiations to secure a staggering $1 million per episode. They were the untouchable kings and queens of the sitcom world, appearing on every magazine cover as a happy, cohesive family enjoying the ride of a lifetime. That was the perfect facade. It was a billion-dollar illusion, polished until it gleamed, designed to make you believe the joy you saw on your TV was real. But beneath the red carpets and the record-breaking ratings, the foundation was rotting. While the studio was busy counting profits, a dark countdown had already started ticking behind the scenes. The world saw Sheldon Cooper, the quirky, beloved genius who could solve the secrets of the universe with a whiteboard marker. But they didn't see the man inside the suit suffocating. Jim Parsons was trapped in a relentless machine of table reads, rehearsals, and live tapings. He was carrying the weight of a massive franchise on his shoulders, forced to deliver robotic precision and manic energy while he was slowly crumbling. The pressure was a physical weight, a silent, crushing force that demanded he be the funniest man in America, even as he felt like he was disappearing. He was screaming on the inside, and nobody heard a thing over the laugh track. The executives didn't understand because they were looking at a bank account, not a calendar. The answer lay specifically in the summer of 2018, a period Parsons later christened his summer of hell. It began with a tragedy that no amount of money could fix. His dog, Otis, a Maltese who had been by his side for 14 years, fell gravely ill. This wasn't just a pet. Otis was his anchor, the one constant through a decade of chaotic fame. But the machine wouldn't stop for grief. Parsons was scheduled to shoot an Intel commercial the same week Otis began to fade. He went to work. He smiled for the cameras, but internally he felt like he was cheating on his dying dog, trading the final moments with his soulmate for another paycheck he didn't need. When Otis passed, it left a hollow space in his chest that the laugh track couldn't fill. The universe wasn't done. Mere days later, while performing on Broadway in The Boys in the Band, the physical toll caught up with the emotional one. During a Saturday matinee curtain call, Parsons stepped out to bow and collapsed. His foot snapped. The injury was a brutal wake-up call. Suddenly, the funniest man on television was hobbling through New York, physically shattered and emotionally bankrupt. He was working double shifts, flying between stage performances in New York and commercial shoots, all while trapped in a medical boot. He described the feeling as teetering on the edge of a cliff, staring down into something dark. He was guilty over Otis, trapped in his own broken body, and terrified by the realization that he was moving too fast to even process his own pain. The broken foot forced him to sit still, and in that stillness, the exhaustion caught up to him. He realized he wasn't just tired, he was depleted. The bone had snapped, but it was his spirit that was truly broken. This was the cracking point. He looked at the calendar and realized that by the end of the next contract, he would be 46 years old, 6 years younger than his father was when he died. The math terrified him. Jack Parsons was a sturdy, reliable man who went to work one morning and never came home. He was killed in a car accident at age 52, a sudden, violent punctuation mark on a life mid-sentence. Jim was only 28 when it happened, young enough to view the tragedy as a distant nightmare, but as he sat in that boot, immobilized and staring at the calendar, the nightmare moved into the room with him. He was staring down the barrel of age 46. The equation was simple, brutal, and impossible to ignore. If he signed on for 2 more seasons, 2 more years of relentless schedules and studio lights, he would emerge on the other side at 48. That left him just 4 years before he reached the age his father ceased to exist. The $50 million offer on the table didn't look like a fortune anymore. It looked like a bribe to look away from the clock. He realized he had spent over a decade existing inside a fake apartment, living a fake life, while his real one was rapidly burning down the fuse. The terror wasn't about being typecast, it was about mortality. He was gripped by a suffocating fear that he would die on a soundstage in Burbank, surrounded by props and cue cards, having never truly lived the life his money had bought him. He wasn't choosing between a sitcom and a play. He was choosing between a paycheck and the possibility of seeing the world before the screen went black. The shadow of age 52 was looming, and for the first time, Sheldon Cooper couldn't offer a logical solution. Jim had to run. If you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button to help us share this story with more fans. He didn't run to an airport or a hideout. He ran to another set. It was supposed to be a routine Intel commercial, just another day of being the quirky, intelligent face the world adored. But the studio air felt thin. Jim stood under the blinding white lights, forcing the familiar plastic smile, when a handler walked onto the set with a dog. It wasn't Otis, but it was a ghost of him. The dog was small, frail, and looked up at Jim with the same tired eyes he had left back home, the eyes of a creature dying while its master pretended to be happy for a camera. That was the moment the silence screamed. The bright studio light suddenly felt like an interrogation lamp. In his head, he could hear the phantom echo of canned laughter, the relentless soundtrack that had dictated his every pause and breath for 12 years. He froze. He looked at the dog, then at his reflection in the camera lens, and the terrifying thought arrived not as a question, but as a verdict. I don't know who I am anymore. He wasn't Jim Parsons, the actor grieving his dying companion. He was just a vessel for Sheldon Cooper. The character had grown so large, so consuming, that it was metabolizing the man beneath it. Sheldon wasn't just a role, he was a parasite, and he was eating Jim alive. The decision didn't happen in a boardroom, it happened in his gut. And once it was made, Jim didn't wait. He walked straight into Chuck Lorre's office, not to negotiate, but to notify. There was no asking for permission, no what-if scenarios. He simply told the creator of the world's biggest sitcom that he was done. But the real explosion didn't happen in that office. It happened when the cast was called in. Kaylee Cuoco and Johnny Galecki walked into the room expecting a victory lap. They thought they were there to discuss season 13. To iron out the details of another lucrative year. Instead, they were walking into an ambush. When Jim dropped the news, the air left the room. They weren't just disappointed, they were furious. They felt blinded. The reaction was visceral. Kaylee didn't just get mad, she broke down. There were tears, lots of them. She and Johnny had been ready to sign on the dotted line, ready to keep the family together. But Jim had unilaterally decided to burn the contract. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The next day, the warmth that had defined their set for 12 years evaporated, replaced by a suffocating, icy tension. It was a cold war. Kaylee could barely make eye contact with Jim during the table read. The chemistry that had fueled a dynasty was suddenly buried under layers of hurt and shock. They had spent over a decade as a tight-knit family, but in the span of 24 hours, they looked at each other like strangers. The bitterness wasn't just about losing a co-star, it was about the power dynamic that had just been exposed. Chuck Lorre had made it clear, there is no show without Sheldon. By walking away, Jim wasn't just quitting his own job, he was firing everyone else. The crew, the writers, his friends, everyone's livelihood was tethered to his decision. He had pulled the pin on the grenade, and everyone else was left standing in the blast radius. The debris from that explosion eventually settled, but the price tag of his departure hung in the air like a heavy fog. $50 million. That was the reported offer for 2 more seasons, a figure that doesn't just pay bills, it alters bloodlines. Most people would mortgage their souls for a fraction of that sum, yet Jim Parsons looked at the check and saw a cage. He realized that no amount of money can buy back time, and at 46, he was terrified of running out of it. He traded a fortune for the one thing Hollywood refuses to sell, his freedom. The final taping in May 2019 wasn't the icy standoff of that first meeting. It was a funeral for a decade of their lives. The walls came down, and the cast held each other, sobbing through the final bow. It was raw, heartbreaking, and heavy. But the second Jim stepped out of stage 25 and walked toward his car, the grief vanished. The air hit his lungs differently. The crushing weight of the physicist, the rhythmic dialogue, the expectations, it all evaporated in the Burbank lot. He wasn't the smartest man on TV anymore. He was finally just Jim. Looking back, the calculus seems insane to the outside world. Was it worth torching the biggest sitcom on the planet and walking away from an empire? Yes, because he didn't just leave a job, he rescued his own identity from being suffocated by a fiction. He proved that sometimes you have to kill your heroes to survive.